Welcome to the show. My name is Jesse, and I teach you how to make your best relationship. Have you ever done something that you didn't want to do, but you did so anyway because you were afraid of what other people would think of you? Or have you wanted to do something but you didn't do it because you were afraid of what other people would think of you? That's exactly what I want to talk about in starting this series on YouTube is authenticity versus your shadow. What do I mean by being authentic? Being authentic is being who you want to be and not worrying about what other people think of you. It's doing what you want to do. It's expressing yourself the way you want to express yourself without worrying what other people think of you. That's being authentic. That's being true to yourself. And in contrast to that is the shadow aspect of oneself. So what do I mean by the shadow? Carl Jung, psychologist long ago when the psychologist movement started becoming a big thing and coming into medicine, right? The shadow, when you think of your shadow, when you're outside, you're walking around and the sun's shining on you and your shadow's right behind you and it's a perfect silhouette of your frame, right? It looks just like you. Well, as far as your outline goes, right? The shadow in psychology is very similar to that. The shadow aspect of oneself is the aspect or those parts of the self that have been suppressed, they have been hidden or simply ignored that ultimately lower your experience in life. Some examples of the shadow. We talked about suppression. When you suppress any of your desires without having proper understanding of why they're being suppressed or why you're being told not to do that, that creates a shadow aspect. Another example would be like a traumatic event or an emotionally charged event, right? That would be a shadow aspect because usually during emotionally charged events you're belittled or you're shamed, right? Those type of things. And so when you're thinking in terms of, take a kid for instance, who's acting out, mom and dad say, don't you get angry, don't you throw a tantrum, be quiet, or don't you cry, right? Those things. That's an emotionally charged event. And yes, that's a form of suppression, right? That has been hidden. The child learns, well, shoot, I don't want to act this way because I get in trouble, so I'm going to stop acting this way, right? So that creates a shadow side of the individual because you are no longer free to do as you feel and want to do. That's a suppression, or that was a traumatic or an emotionally charged event that made you feel shamed or belittled, right? Another version or another aspect of this shadow part of ourselves is also can also be found from limiting beliefs that we carry. Now, these limiting beliefs can happen from trauma and from suppression, but they can also happen from conditioning. Like, how was your home when you grew up? How were you conditioned to think? What are your beliefs that you carry? As well as what society did you grow up in? And what were those predominant beliefs that you carry, right? We all come into this life as a sponge, per se. We're just soaking up information, and depending on your own experience, that develops the lens that you see the world. That's how you perceive the world and think that it is just this specific certain way, right? And with that, those things that we suppress, those things that we try to hide away or ignore, those things ultimately become problems in our life, and they're kind of like secret parts of ourselves that stop us from ultimately getting what we want in life, and especially in our relationships. As I started this series, I wanted to talk about, we have a disconnect with ourselves. We have a huge disconnect in society with the self, and when we first heal that, then it becomes so much easier to build the type of relationships we want to have. And so that's why I wanted to address the authenticity versus the shadow as the first YouTube video. But let's talk about the problem with the shadow aspect of ourselves. What are the problems associated with the shadow? Probably the biggest one is being unfulfilled. when you're operating and you're carrying this baggage around that's keeping you from feeling love, joy, peace, and gratitude, those higher emotions that we are allowed to feel and experience here, when we're not feeling those, when we're feeling those lower emotions, whatever those are, that could be depression, it could be anxiety, it could be anger, frustration, hate, greed, all of those lower vibrations. So the problem with the shadow is we have picked up these beliefs, we have picked up this baggage, and some people pick up more than others, that weigh you down and keep you from getting what you want, thus making it so you are unfulfilled, thus making you feel unhappy. And when you're feeling unhappy, when you're feeling unfulfilled, when you feel like you're not living in your purpose, that creates a disconnect in yourself. That creates a disconnect from your highest version of you, or the core version of you, the self, the inner self, your authentic self. Now with the shadow, because there's this disconnect, your ability to feel those higher emotions, that love, joy, peace, and gratitude, those type of emotions, that becomes lessened. And when that becomes lessened, it's hard to give that in full capacity. There's a saying that goes around, it's hard to give something that you don't have, right? And really it's impossible. It's impossible to give someone something you don't have. And that's how love is. When you're trying to build a loving, powerful relationship, whether that's with your spouse or with your kids or with someone else, that becomes very hard to do when you have this disconnect with yourself. And the most important thing to first start doing is to heal up that disconnect with the core self, with that highest authentic version of yourself. And so this is the first video in this YouTube channel that we've created to help you make your best relationship. And to help you build and make your best relationship, you've got to start at home plate, the core, right? You've got to start with yourself, heal up certain aspects of yourself, and doing so will allow you to expand in consciousness, will allow you to expand in awareness. You'll see opportunities that you didn't see, and you'll learn and grow and become, essentially dropping off the baggages, the limiting beliefs that you've carried around since you were young. Eventually let those go and become your highest and best self, whatever that means for you. And when you are your highest and best self, you become powerful. You become fulfilled. You start living in your purpose. Life starts having significant meaning for you. When we have the shadow, we lose our power. With this shadow aspect of ourselves, we become people pleasers. We become fearful, operating at those lower emotional states of being, those lower emotions that keep us trapped, stuck, and unhappy, and living day in and day out through the same cycles of living that don't bring us fulfillment and meaning in life. And so, with understanding this principle of being authentic versus the shadow aspect of ourselves, I think this is the perfect place to start in making your best relationship. If this principle has been of use to you, please like, subscribe, share. Tomorrow I will be releasing a video on how to overcome this shadow aspect of yourself. Kind of a general overview of that, and we'll dive in depth as future videos come out. But thank you for watching, and may you make your best relationship.